The communication array on Station Kepler 442b crackled with static as Commander Zora Thelkane of the Galactic Federation tried desperately to boost the signal strength. Around her, the command center buzzed with frantic activity as her crew worked to maintain their failing defenses against the Void Hunters, a merciless species that consumed entire star systems for their dark energy. "Commander, the outer defense grid is down to 30%, reported Lieutenant Vex, her reptilian features twisted with worry. The Saurian's scaled hands moved across her console with practiced precision, but even her advanced technical skills couldn't mask the desperation in her voice. Zara nodded grimly, her 6 eyes scanning the tactical display that showed red warnings across every sector. The station, a massive research facility housing over 50,000 beings from 12 different species, was the last bastion of civilization in this arm of the galaxy. For 3 standard weeks, they had held against the relentless assault of the Void Hunters, but their resources were nearly exhausted. "What's our status on the evacuation ships?" Zara asked, turning to her second-in-command, Major Keth Zorvok. The blue-skinned Andromedan's normally calm demeanor showed cracks of strain as he consulted his datapad. "The last civilian transport launched 6 hours ago, but it barely made it past the first wave of Hunter Scouts," he reported. "Long-range sensors show they're being pursued. Even if they reach Federation space, I doubt they'll make it to safety." The station shuddered as another barrage of dark energy weapons struck their shields. Through the reinforced viewport, Zara could see the twisted forms of Void Hunter vessels, organic monstrosities that seemed to bend light itself around their hulls. They moved like predators through space, their biomechanical forms pulsing with an unnatural hunger. "Sir, we're receiving a priority transmission from Admiral Nexus on board the Federation flagship Harmony's Edge," announced Communications Officer Lyra, her crystalline features glowing with nervous energy. The silicate's voice resonated through her mineral body, creating an almost musical quality that contrasted sharply with the dire nature of her words. Zara activated the main holographic display, and the weathered face of Admiral Nexus materialized before them. The Centaur's 4 arms gestured frantically as he spoke, his usually pristine uniform torn and bloodied. "Commander Thelkane, this is likely my final transmission. The entire 5th Fleet has been overrun. The Void Hunters have consumed the Gamma Sector completely, and they're moving toward the core worlds. We estimate you have perhaps 12 hours before they finish with your position and advance to Proxima Central." The bridge fell silent except for the steady hum of failing life support systems. Proxima Central was home to over 10 billion souls, the heart of Federation civilization. "Admiral, surely there must be something," Zara began, but Nexus cut her off with a gesture of one of his secondary arms. "Commander, I'm authorizing you to activate Protocol Omega. Send out the deepest emergency beacon on all frequencies. Perhaps anyone, will hear it and come to help. The Federation's military is scattered, broken. This is our last hope." The transmission cut to static, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Protocol Omega was reserved for the absolute extinction of their civilization, a call for help that would broadcast their exact location to anyone and everyone in the galaxy, friendly or hostile. Zara straightened her shoulders, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on her like a physical force. She had served in the Federation Navy for 23 standard years, rising through the ranks during the peaceful expansion era. Nothing in her training had prepared her for this moment. "Lyra, prepare the Omega transmission. Include our tactical situation, casualty reports, and a complete data dump of everything we know about the Void Hunters' capabilities and weaknesses." "Commander," Major Zorvok stepped closer, his voice low. "Once we send that signal, every pirate, raider, and hostile species in 3 sectors will know exactly where we are and how vulnerable we are." "The Void Hunters already know where we are, Major," Zara replied, watching another section of their shields flicker and fail on the tactical display. "At this point, we need any help we can get regardless of the source. As Lyra worked to compile the emergency broadcast, the station's senior staff gathered around the command table. Dr. Marin Lightwing, the station's chief scientist, fluttered her iridescent wings nervously. The moth-like luminary's compound eyes reflected the red warning lights as she spoke. "Commander, my research team has been analyzing the Hunter attack patterns. They're not just destroying our infrastructure, they're harvesting it. Every ship they consume, every station they overrun, makes them stronger. They're turning our own technology against us." Chief Engineer Boric Ironhold, a massive bear-like ursinoid, growled his agreement. "The creatures are adapting faster than we can counter them. Each wave of attacks is more sophisticated than the last. It's as if they're learning from every encounter, which is why we need to get this information to whoever might be listening," Zara said firmly. "Even if we don't survive, perhaps others can learn from our experience." The station shook again, more violently this time. Warning klaxons began sounding throughout the facility as structural damage reports flooded in from all sections. "Commander, the Omega beacon is ready for transmission," Lyra announced, her crystalline form dimming with exhaustion. "Should I proceed?" Zara looked around the bridge at her diverse crew, beings from across the galaxy who had chosen to serve together in the name of peace and exploration. Now, they faced extinction at the hands of creatures that seemed to embody the very antithesis of everything the Federation stood for. "Send it," she commanded. The communications array pulsed with energy as the emergency beacon launched into space, carrying their desperate plea across the vast distances between stars. The message contained coordinates, tactical data, and a simple request that echoed through the cosmos. "This is Federation Station Kepler 442b. We are under attack by hostile forces. Any ships capable of rendering assistance, please respond. This may be our final transmission." Hours passed in relative quiet, broken only by the occasional probe from Hunter scouts testing their defenses. The crew worked frantically to repair what systems they could while rationing their remaining power reserves. In the medical bay, Dr. Healer Sulthana tended to the wounded with her 4 graceful arms, the plant-like Verdanian's leaves rustling with each movement as she synthesized healing compounds from her own body chemistry. "Commander," Lieutenant Vex called out suddenly, her reptilian features alert. "I'm detecting movement at the edge of our sensor range. Multiple contacts, unknown configuration." Zara hurried to the sensor station, studying the readings with growing concern. The contacts were large, much larger than typical hunter vessels, but they weren't moving with the organic, predatory motion characteristic of the enemy. "Are they responding to our beacon?" she asked. "Unknown, sir. They're still too far out to get clear readings," but Vex paused, her scaled brow furrowing in confusion. "Commander, these ships don't match any known Federation designs, but they're also completely different from the Void Hunters. The energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases." Major Zorvok joined them at the sensor station, his blue skin paling as he studied the data. Could they be another hostile species, drawn by our signal? "At this point, it hardly matters," Zara replied grimly. "We're running on emergency power, our weapons are nearly depleted, and our shields won't last another major assault. Whether these newcomers are friends or enemies, they couldn't make our situation much worse." As if summoned by her words, the long-range scanners suddenly screamed with proximity alerts. The Void Hunter fleet, having finished consuming the remnants of Admiral Nexus's task force, was accelerating toward the station. The organic vessels stretched and contracted like living muscle as they prepared for their final assault. "All hands, battle stations," Zara announced over the station-wide communications. "This is it, everyone. Remember what we're fighting for. Not just our lives, but the future of galactic civilization. Every second we hold them here is another second for the core worlds to prepare their defenses." The bridge crew took their positions with grim determination. They had long since passed the point where victory was possible. Now they fought simply to make their deaths meaningful. "Hunter Fleet will be in weapons range in 47 minutes, reported Weapons Officer Track Steelclaw, the cyborg's mechanical enhancements whirring as he prepared their remaining armaments. I can give him a fight, Commander, but with our power levels. Do what you can, Track. Every shot counts. The unknown contacts were still approaching from a different vector, but their intentions remained unclear. Some crew members whispered hopes that they might be a lost Federation fleet, or perhaps allies from beyond known space. Others feared they were just more predators, drawn by the scent of weakness and desperation. Commander, Dr. Lightwing approached with a data pad clutched in her delicate appendages. My team has been working on a theory about the Void Hunter's weakness. They seem to have trouble with certain electromagnetic frequencies, specifically those generated by quantum cascade reactors operating at maximum output. Are you suggesting we overload our reactor? Major Zorvok asked, understanding the implications immediately. It would create a massive pulse that might disrupt their biomechanical systems, but the scientists' wings drooped. It would also destroy the station and everyone on it. Zara considered the option carefully. A suicide run that might take out a significant portion of the Hunter fleet could save countless lives in the core worlds. But the decision would condemn her crew and the remaining civilians on the station to certain death. Prepare the overload sequence, but don't initiate it yet, she ordered. We'll keep it as a final option. The minutes crawled by like hours as both fleets approached. The Hunter vessels had begun to spread out, preparing to surround the station and prevent any chance of escape. Their organic hulls pulsed with anticipation, weapon ports opening like hungry mouths ready to feed. 20 minutes to Hunter arrival, announced Lieutenant Vex. The unknown contacts are wait. She bent over her console, double-checking her readings. Commander, you need to see this. Zara moved to the sensor station and felt her heart skip a beat. The unknown ships had suddenly accelerated far beyond what should have been possible with any known propulsion technology. They were moving so fast that the sensors could barely track them, leaving streaks of exotic energy in their wake. What kind of engines can generate that much velocity? Major Zorvok breathed, his scientific training struggling to comprehend the readings. I don't know, Zara admitted, but they're going to reach us before the Hunters do. The main viewer automatically adjusted to track the incoming vessels, and what they saw defied explanation. The ships were massive, angular constructions of metal and ceramic that looked like they had been forged in the heart of a star. Their hulls bore scars and battle damage that spoke of countless conflicts, yet they moved through space with predatory grace. Are those weapons? Dr. Lightwing whispered, pointing at the massive gun batteries that bristled from every surface of the lead vessel. Commander, we're being hailed, Lyra announced, her crystalline form brightening with surprise. The signal is coming from the lead ship. Put it through, Zara ordered, straightening her uniform and hoping these newcomers would prove to be allies rather than additional enemies. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing a being unlike any in the Federation databases. Tall and bipedal, with pale skin marked by old scars and eyes the color of winter storms, the creature wore armor that looked both primitive and advanced. When it spoke, its voice carried an accent that was somehow both harsh and melodic. This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the Terran Alliance vessel Retribution. We received your distress call and are moving to assist. Hold your position and keep your heads down. We're about to show these Void Hunter bastards what happens when they threaten civilized worlds. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Terran Alliance? The name didn't appear in any Federation records, yet the confidence in the Admiral's voice suggested these beings had faced the Void Hunters before and lived to tell about it. Sir, Weapons Officer Steelclaw called out, his mechanical voice tight with disbelief. I'm reading massive energy buildups across the Terran fleet. Those weapon signatures are off the charts. Through the main viewer, they watched as the lead Terran vessel began to glow with internal fire. Weapon ports opened along its hull like the eyes of some ancient predator, and space itself seemed to bend around the ship as it prepared to engage. The Void Hunter fleet, sensing the new threat, began to turn their attention toward the approaching Terrans. The organic vessels writhed and pulsed as they reconfigured their formations, preparing to face an enemy they had never encountered before. "This is about to get interesting," Major Zorvok murmured, his four hands working frantically to reinforce their shields and prepare the station's minimal defenses. As both fleets closed the distance, Zara found herself caught between hope and terror. These Terrans clearly possessed technology that surpassed anything in Federation space. But would it be enough to turn the tide against an enemy that had consumed half the galaxy? The first exchange of fire lit up the darkness of space like the birth of a new star, and the fate of Station Kepler 442b, and perhaps all of galactic civilization, hung in the balance. The countdown to battle had begun, and nothing would ever be the same. The first volley from the Terran fleet struck the Void Hunter formation like the fist of an angry god. Streams of superheated plasma and exotic matter tore through space, each shot precisely targeted to exploit weaknesses in the organic ship's bioarmor. The lead Terran vessel, the Retribution, fired a weapon that seemed to tear reality itself apart, creating a brief wound in space-time that consumed 3 Hunter vessels in an instant. Commander Zura Thelkane watched in stunned amazement from the bridge of Station Kepler 442b as the battle unfolded before them. The Void Hunters, who had seemed invincible during their weeks of siege, were suddenly struggling to maintain formation against an enemy that fought with brutal efficiency and weapons technology that defied conventional physics. "Commander," Lieutenant Vex called out, her reptilian voice filled with awe. "The Terrans are broadcasting tactical data to us. They're sharing their targeting solutions in real time." Zara moved to the communication station where the crystalline form of Officer Lyra was processing the incoming data streams. The information was incredibly detailed, precise weak points on each Hunter vessel, optimal firing patterns, and even predictive movement algorithms that anticipated the organic ship's responses. How do they know so much about the Hunters? Major Zorvok wondered aloud, his 4 blue arms working frantically to integrate the Terran data into their own targeting systems. Before anyone could answer, the station's communications array crackled with another transmission. This time, the speaker was a different Terran, a woman with short dark hair and eyes that held the hardness of someone who had seen too much war. "Station Kepler 442b. This is Captain Maria Santos of the escort destroyer Vengeful Spirit. We're moving to provide close defense for your position. You might want to reroute power to your sensors. You're about to see something special." The destroyer in question was smaller than the massive Terran battleships, but moved with incredible agility. As it approached the station, its hull began to reconfigure itself, armor plates sliding apart to reveal weapon systems that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "When the name of the core worlds is that," Dr. Marin Lightwing whispered, her compound eyes tracking the impossible geometries of the destroyer's weapons. Chief Engineer Boric Ironhold consulted his readings, his bear-like features scrunched in confusion. "The energy patterns don't make sense, Commander. Those weapons appear to be drawing power from quantum vacuum fluctuations. That should be impossible." Another Hunter attack wave emerged from the shadow of a nearby asteroid field, their organic forms writhing with predatory hunger. These vessels were different from the previous attackers, larger, more heavily armed, with biomechanical enhancements that pulsed with dark energy. The Federation databases had no records of these particular variants. "New Hunter configuration," reported Weapons Officer Track Steelclaw, his cybernetic enhancements interfacing directly with the sensor array. "These appear to be their heavy assault units. Each one is approximately the size of a Federation cruiser." The Terran fleet responded to the new threat without hesitation. The massive dreadnought at the center of their formation, bearing the designation Terra's Wrath, opened fire with weapons that seemed to bend space itself. Gravity wells appeared around the Hunter vessels, crushing them inward while streams of antimatter converted their bioarmor into pure energy. But it was the smaller Terran ships that truly impressed the Federation observers. Fast attack craft, no larger than shuttles, danced between the hunter vessels, their weapons punching holes in armor that had shrugged off Federation capital ship guns. These fighters moved with precision that suggested either incredible skill or some form of augmented reflexes. "Commander, we're receiving another transmission," Lyra announced. "This one is on a direct, encrypted channel." The holographic display activated, revealing Admiral Chun once again. This time, however, the image quality was much clearer, allowing the Federation crew to see details they had missed before. The Admiral's armor was inscribed with symbols that looked like battle honors, and her pale blue eyes held depths that spoke of impossible experiences. "Commander Thelkane, we need to discuss the tactical situation. The Void Hunters you're facing are a scouting force. The real fleet is approximately 6 hours behind them. We estimate their main force includes at least 40 planetary siege engines and twice that number of support vessels." Zara felt her primary heart skip a beat. The forces they had been struggling against for weeks were merely scouts? "Admiral, with respect, how can you be so certain of their numbers and capabilities?" Admiral Chin's expression grew grim. "Because we've been fighting these bastards for longer than you might imagine. The Terran Alliance has been at war with the Void Hunters for over 300 standard years." The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. 300 years of constant warfare against an enemy that the Federation had only recently encountered. How is that possible? "Admiral." Dr. Lightwing stepped forward, her iridescent wings trembling with excitement despite the dire circumstances. "Our records show no contact with any Terran Alliance in Federation space. Where do your people originate?" The Admiral smiled, and there was something predatory in the expression. "Doctor, we come from what you would call the edge sectors, the regions beyond your galactic arm, where the physics get a bit more flexible. Our homeworld learned about the Void Hunters the hard way, but we adapted. We always adapt." Major Zorvok leaned closer to the display, studying the Admiral's features with fascination. "Are your people augmented in some way? Your reaction times and tactical processing seem to exceed biological norms." "Major, humans are what the rest of the galaxy calls a Deathworld species. We evolved on a planet that tried very hard to kill us every single day. When we finally reached the stars and discovered that space was also trying to kill us, we just figured it was normal. The Void Hunters made a mistake when they tried to add our worlds to their collection. We don't just survive, we thrive in conditions that would destroy most other species." The battle around the station intensified as more hunter vessels emerged from hyperspace. These new arrivals were clearly coordinating with the existing forces, their biomechanical forms pulsing in synchronized patterns as they established communication networks. "Admiral, their reinforcements are arriving faster than anticipated," Zara reported, watching the tactical display as red contacts multiplied across the screen. "We see them. Time to demonstrate why humans are considered apex predators even among Deathworld species. All Terran vessels, execute Protocol Berserker." The effect was immediate and terrifying to behold. The Terran ships suddenly began moving in ways that defied conventional tactical doctrine. Instead of maintaining formation and exchanging fire at safe distances, they accelerated directly into the heart of the Hunter fleet, their weapons firing continuously as they carved bloody swaths through the enemy ranks. "They're insane," Major Zorvok breathed, watching a Terran cruiser ram straight through a Hunter bioship twice its size, emerging for the other side with its hull glowing from internal fires but still fighting. "No." Admiral Chin's voice carried across the communications channel with obvious pride. "They're human." The space around Station Kepler 442b became a maelstrom of energy weapons, exotic matter streams, and the twisted wreckage of destroyed vessels. But the Terrans were winning. Every exchange favored them. Every tactical maneuver gained advantage over their enemies. "Commander," Communications Officer Lyra announced, her crystalline form brightening with excitement. We're receiving additional signals. Multiple ships approaching from the galactic rim. The long-range sensors began detecting new contacts, dozens of them, all moving at velocities that strained the limits of the detection equipment. As they drew closer, their configurations became visible, and Zara gasped in recognition. "Those are Deathworld Alliance vessels," she whispered. "Ursinoid battle cruisers, mantid assault carriers, and what are those crystalline ships?" Admiral Chun turned to consult with someone off-screen before responding. "Those would be the collective consciousness ships from the Granite Worlds. When we received your distress call, we forwarded it to our allies in the Deathworld Alliance. Apparently, your situation qualified as appropriately challenging for a joint operation." A massive vessel materialized at the edge of sensor range, its hull composed entirely of living crystal that refracted starlight into prismatic displays of color. Alongside it came ships that looked more like metal asteroids than constructed vessels, their surfaces bristling with weapons that had been carved directly from living rock. "The cavalry has arrived," Admiral Chun announced with satisfaction. "Hunter vessels, this is your final warning. Withdraw from this system immediately or face complete annihilation. You have 30 seconds to comply." The response from the Void Hunters was immediate and predictable. They began charging their most powerful weapons while accelerating toward the station. The organic vessels pulsed with dark energy as they prepared to unleash destruction on everything within range. They never got the chance. The Deathworld Alliance fleet opened fire simultaneously, and the result was beyond anything in Federation military doctrine. Gravity weapons from the Granite Worlds twisted space itself into knots, while Ursinoid plasma cannons superheated entire sections of the battlefield. Mantid bioweapons released swarms of mechanical organisms that devoured hunter vessels from the inside out. But it was the human weapons that proved most devastating. They didn't just destroy the enemy's ships, they unmade them, reducing the biomechanical constructs to their component atoms and scattering them across space like cosmic dust. "Dear gods," Dr. Lightwing whispered, her scientific mind struggling to process the destruction. "The energy expenditure alone should be impossible. How are they powering those weapons?" "Doctor, when you're fighting for the survival of your species, you learn to find energy sources that others consider too dangerous to use," Admiral Chen replied. "We're drawing power directly from stellar cores, dimensional rifts, and controlled singularities. It's risky but effective." The battle was over in less than 10 minutes. Where once a formidable hunter fleet had threatened the station, now only debris remained. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the gentle hum of the station's life support systems. "Commander Thelkane, this is Admiral Chun. The immediate threat has been neutralized, but we need to discuss the larger situation. The Hunter main fleet is still approaching, and they're going to be significantly more dangerous than this advance force." Zara nodded, still trying to process what she had witnessed. "Admiral, we're prepared to listen to any advice you can offer. Our own military forces have been completely overwhelmed. That's because you've been fighting them like civilized beings, Commander. The Void Hunters don't understand civilization. They only understand extinction. To defeat them, you have to be willing to become something they fear more than they fear death." Major Zorvok leaned forward, his curiosity overcoming his diplomatic training. "Admiral, what exactly are you suggesting?" The Terran leader's smile was cold and predatory. "We're going to teach you how to fight like Deathworlders, Major. By the time we're done, the Federation will understand why the galaxy's most dangerous predators prefer to avoid human space." Dr. Healer Sulthana had been tending to casualties in the medical bay, but now she spoke up from her position at a secondary communications console. Her plant-like features rustled with concern as she addressed the Admiral. "Admiral Chun, with respect, the Federation's principles are based on peaceful coexistence and the protection of all sentient life. What you're proposing sounds like genocide, Doctor." Admiral Chen's voice was matter-of-fact. "That's exactly what it is. The Void Hunters have consumed thousands of civilizations across multiple galactic arms. They don't negotiate, they don't show mercy, and they don't stop until everything in their path is dead or absorbed into their collective. Sometimes the only way to preserve life is to become very, very good at taking it. Chief Engineer Ironhold growled his agreement, his massive frame tensing with barely controlled aggression. The Admiral is right. I've seen the reports from the frontier worlds. Entire populations consumed, their knowledge and technology turned against other victims. These creatures are a plague that needs to be eradicated. Engineer Ironhold understands. Admiral Chen nodded approvingly. Deathworlders recognize existential threats when they see them. The question is whether the Federation has the will to do what's necessary. The debate might have continued, but Lieutenant Vex suddenly interrupted with urgent readings from the long-range sensors. Commander, we're detecting massive hyperspace distortions at the edge of the system. The signature matches Hunter technology, but the scale. The main fleet, Admiral Chun confirmed grimly. Larger than we anticipated. I count at least 60 major vessels and supporting elements. They're going to arrive in approximately 4 hours. Zara studied the sensor readings with growing alarm. The approaching fleet dwarfed anything in Federation military history. Each of the larger vessels was the size of a small moon, their biomechanical forms pulsing with the consumed essence of countless civilizations. Admiral, even with our combined forces, can we realistically hope to stop something of that magnitude? She asked. Commander, you're thinking like a Federation officer, considering losses, minimizing damage, following rules of engagement. Admiral Chen's voice carried the weight of centuries of warfare. We're going to think like humans instead. We're going to do something so completely insane that it will either save your civilization or destroy everything within 50 light years. Possibly both. The implications of that statement hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Around the bridge, the diverse crew of Station Kepler 442b exchanged glances that mixed hope with terror. They were about to learn what it meant to fight alongside beings who had evolved on worlds that demanded they become the galaxy's most efficient killers. What do you need from us, Admiral? Zara asked, her decision made. The Federation's survival was worth any risk, any compromise of their ideals. First, we need complete tactical data on your defensive capabilities and resources. Second, we need you to contact every Federation vessel within communication range and order them to fall back to the core worlds. Third, we need you to authorize the download of our tactical database into your computers. Major Zorvok raised a concern. Admiral, downloading unknown software could compromise our entire network. Admiral Chen's laugh was sharp and humorless. Major, in 4 hours you're going to face an enemy that has consumed half the galaxy. Your network security is the least of your problems. Besides, you're going to need our software to understand what comes next. As the Federation crew began implementing the Admiral's requests, the various Deathworld Alliance ships took up defensive positions around the station. The sight was both comforting and unsettling. Massive vessels bristling with weapons that could crack planets, crewed by beings who had turned survival into an art form. Admiral, one final question, Dr. Lightwing asked hesitantly. When this is over, assuming we survive, what happens to the Federation? How do we return to peaceful exploration after learning to think like predators? Admiral Chen's expression softened slightly, showing a glimpse of the woman beneath the warrior. Doctor, that's the burden of survival. Once you've learned to fight like a Deathworlder, you never really stop being one. The universe is a dangerous place, and sometimes the only way to preserve civilization is to become uncivilized enough to protect it. The countdown to the main battle had begun, and the fate of galactic civilization hung in the balance. In 4 hours, they would learn whether the combined fury of the galaxy's most dangerous species could stand against an enemy that had consumed countless worlds. The real war was about to begin. The tactical briefing room aboard the Terran Alliance flagship Retribution was unlike anything Commander Zerethel Kane had ever experienced. The walls were lined with displays showing real-time intelligence on Void Hunter fleet movements, weapon capabilities, and something the humans called extinction protocols. The air itself seemed to vibrate with barely contained energy from the ship's exotic power systems. Admiral Sarah Chun stood at the head of a holographic tactical table that displayed the approaching Hunter Armada in terrifying detail. Each enemy vessel was rendered with precision that spoke of centuries of bitter experience, complete with weak points, behavioral patterns, and recommended destruction methodologies. Ladies, gentlemen, and assorted sentient beings, Admiral Chun began, her pale eyes scanning the assembled representatives from Station Kepler, 442b, and the various Deathworld Alliance vessels. We have 3 hours and 47 minutes before the largest Void Hunter fleet in recorded history arrives in this system. What we do in the next 4 hours will determine whether galactic civilization survives or becomes another meal for these cosmic parasites. Captain Maria Santos of the destroyer Vengeful Spirit gestured toward the tactical display with a scarred hand. Admiral, intelligence suggests this fleet includes at least 12 Devourer-class World Eaters. Each one is capable of consuming an entire planet's biosphere in a matter of hours. Major Zorvok leaned forward, his 4 blue arms folded with concern. How does one even begin to fight something like that? Our largest weapons barely scratched their advanced scouts. A new voice entered the conversation, deep, resonant, and carrying the weight of ancient stone. The speaker was Admiral Granite Crusher of Enemies from the Collective Consciousness Fleet, his crystalline form refracting the briefing room's lights into prismatic displays. Major Who questions victory. The Federation fights with restraint and consideration for minimal casualties. The Void Hunters respond only to absolute destruction. Therefore, we must become absolute destruction. Commander Thelkane studied the alien admiral with fascination. The Granite World species were living crystal beings who measured their lives in geological timescales. For beings like this to advocate total warfare spoke volumes about the threat they faced. Admiral Granite Crusher, what exactly are you proposing? Dr. Marin Lightwing asked, her iridescent wings trembling with scientific curiosity despite the dire circumstances. The crystalline being's form shifted, displaying internal structures that pulsed with controlled energy. The collective has prepared stellar-grade mining charges. We will detonate the system star and use the resulting supernova to sterilize the Hunter fleet. The briefing room fell into stunned silence. The casual discussion of star-killing weapons was beyond anything in Federation military doctrine. Even their most classified superweapons paled in comparison to the raw destructive power being discussed. That would also destroy everything else in the system, Major Zorvok pointed out, his diplomatic training struggling with the concept. Including us, the station, and any chance of Federation survivors escaping to warn the core worlds. Admiral Chun smiled, and there was something deeply unsettling about the expression. Major, that's Plan C. Plans A and B are significantly more creative, though arguably just as insane. Chief Engineer Borak Ironhold growled his approval, the massive Ursinoid's battle-scarred features showing fierce anticipation. Admiral, my people are prepared to implement whatever strategy gives us the best chance of victory. We've fought these creatures before, and we know they respond only to overwhelming force. Captain Santos activated a secondary display showing the approach vectors of various Alliance vessels. The Mantid Swarm fleets are moving into position at coordinates 77 Alpha. Their bioships are ready to implement cellular disruption protocols on any Hunter vessels that survive the initial bombardment. Dr. Lightwing studied the tactical data with growing amazement. The coordination between your various species is remarkable. How do you maintain such unity when your biologies are so fundamentally different? Admiral Chin's expression grew more serious. Doctor, when you're fighting for survival against an enemy that wants to consume everything you've ever loved, differences in biology become irrelevant. Deathworlders understand that cooperation isn't just beneficial, it's mandatory for continued existence. A new alert chimed through the briefing room as long-range sensors detected additional movement in the approaching Hunter fleet. Lieutenant Commander Vex, who had transported over from the station to assist with intelligence gathering, consulted her portable scanner with growing alarm. Admiral, the Hunter formations are unusual. They're not maintaining standard siege configurations. Instead, they appear to be setting up some kind of massive ritual pattern. Admiral Chun and Captain Santos exchanged glances that spoke of shared terrible knowledge. They're preparing for a harvest convergence, Captain Santos said grimly. We've seen this twice before at the Epsilon Eridani massacre and during the fall of the Centauri colonies. What exactly is a harvest convergence? Commander Thelkane asked, dreading the answer. Admiral Chun manipulated the holographic display to show historical recordings of previous encounters. The images were horrifying, entire star systems being drained of energy while massive hunter vessels performed synchronized rituals that seemed to bend the laws of physics. The Void Hunters don't just consume matter and energy, Commander. They harvest the quantum information that defines reality itself. A harvest convergence allows them to fundamentally alter local space-time, making it easier to break down the barriers between dimensions and feed on the underlying structure of existence. Dr. Healer Silthana, who had been monitoring the briefing from the medical bay, spoke up through the communication link. Her plant-like features rustled with distress as she processed the implications. Admiral, are you saying these creatures can literally unmake reality itself? In localized areas, yes. The good news is that the process requires enormous amounts of concentrated effort and leaves them temporarily vulnerable. The bad news is that if we don't stop them during the vulnerability window, they'll become powerful enough to consume this entire galactic arm. The weight of responsibility settled on the assembled commanders like a physical force. They weren't just fighting for their own survival. They were the last line of defense between the Void Hunters and billions of innocent lives in the Federation's core worlds. Admiral, what's Plan A? Commander Thelkane asked, her 6 eyes fixed on a human leader with desperate hope. Admiral Chun smiled again, and this time the expression was genuinely frightening. We're going to do something that has never been attempted in the history of galactic warfare. We're going to turn their own harvest convergence against them. She manipulated the tactical display to show the Alliance fleet's positioning. Instead of a traditional defensive formation, the Deathworlder vessels were arranging themselves in patterns that seemed to mirror the approaching Hunter formations. The collective consciousness has been studying Void Hunter rituals for thousands of years. They've discovered that the quantum entanglement effects that power harvest convergences can be redirected with the proper application of exotic matter streams and controlled gravitational anomalies. Admiral Granite Crusher of Enemies pulsed with approval, his crystalline form brightening as he added details to the explanation. The mathematics are elegant yet terrible. We will allow the hunters to begin their convergence. Then, introduce harmonic disruptions that will cause their own energy to tear them apart from within. Captain Santos highlighted specific technical requirements on the display. The timing has to be perfect. We need to let them build up sufficient quantum entanglement to make the reversal effective, but not so much that they can complete the process and consume local reality. Chief Engineer Ironhold studied the technical specifications with professional interest. The power requirements are staggering. We'll need to channel the output of every fusion reactor in the fleet simultaneously. Which brings us to the human contribution to this insane plan, Admiral Chen announced. The Terran Alliance has developed weapons that draw power directly from dimensional rifts. We're going to tear holes in reality itself and use the resulting energy cascade to supercharge the convergence reversal. The Federation representatives exchanged glances of barely controlled terror. The casual discussion of reality-warping weapons and dimensional manipulation was so far beyond their experience that it felt like listening to God's plan the destruction of the universe. Admiral, Dr. Lightwing asked hesitantly, what are the risks if this plan fails? Total annihilation of everything within approximately 50 light-years, followed by the gradual expansion of a reality dead zone that will eventually consume the entire galactic arm. Admiral Chun replied matter-of-factly. But if we do nothing, the result will be the same, just slower. Major Zorvok consulted his datapad, running calculations on his portable computer. Admiral, even if your plan succeeds, the energy release will likely destroy Station Kepler, 442b, and everything in the immediate vicinity. Major, that's why Plan B exists. If the convergence reversal works, we'll have approximately 17 minutes to evacuate all personnel to minimum safe distance before the dimensional feedback reaches critical levels. Commander Thelkane felt a strange mixture of hope and despair. These Deathworlders had developed plans that might actually work, but the cost would be enormous. The station she had defended for weeks would be lost, along with most of the research data and infrastructure that represented decades of Federation scientific advancement. Commander, Admiral Chun seemed to read her thoughts. In war, you have to choose between losing everything and losing almost everything. We're offering you the chance to save your people and your civilization. The rest can be rebuilt. A priority alert suddenly blared through the briefing room as the sensor networks detected new activity in the approaching hunter fleet. The organic vessels had begun pulsing in synchronized patterns, their biomechanical forms glowing with internal energy as they prepared to begin their convergence ritual. "They're starting early," Captain Santos observed, consulting her tactical displays with professional calm. "The convergence will reach critical mass in approximately 90 minutes, which means we need to begin implementation of Plan A immediately," Admiral Chin decided. "All Alliance vessels assume ritual disruption positions. Federation personnel begin evacuation procedures. This is going to get very dangerous very quickly." The next few minutes were a whirlwind of activity as the assembled fleet moved into position. The massive collective consciousness ships began generating gravitational anomalies that bent space itself into knots, while Ursinoid battlecruisers charged their plasma weapons to maximum output. Manted bioships released clouds of mechanical organisms that would serve as quantum sensors during the convergence reversal. Commander Thelkane returned to Station Kepler, 442b, to coordinate the evacuation efforts. Her crew worked with desperate efficiency to transfer essential personnel and critical data to the Alliance vessels before the dimensional fireworks began. "Commander, the last of the civilian refugees are boarding the Terran transport vessels," reported Lieutenant Vex, her reptilian features tight with concentration as she managed the logistics of evacuating 50,000 beings in under an hour. "What about the research data?" Dr. Lightwing asked, her scientific mind refusing to abandon decades of accumulated knowledge, even in the face of cosmic annihilation. "The collective consciousness has agreed to store our entire database in their crystalline memory banks," Major Zorvok reported. "Their storage capacity is measured in exabytes, so space won't be an issue." Communications Officer Lyra flickered with nervous energy as she managed the constant stream of tactical updates flowing between the various Alliance vessels. "Commander, Admiral Chun is requesting final confirmation that all Federation personnel are clear of the danger zone." Commander Thelkane took one last look around the bridge that had been her home for the past 3 years. The station represented everything noble about Federation civilization: scientific advancement, peaceful cooperation between species, and the endless quest for knowledge. In a few minutes, it would be reduced to cosmic dust. "Tell Admiral Chun that all Federation personnel are accounted for. We're ready to implement Plan A." The response came immediately. "Understood, Commander. All Alliance vessels begin convergence disruption on my mark. Remember, we only get one shot at this. If we fail, there won't be anyone left to remember our names." Through the viewports of the evacuation transport, Commander Thelkane watched as the Deathworlder Alliance fleet began to glow with exotic energies. The space around Station Kepler, 442b, started to distort as gravitational weapons and dimensional rifts tore holes in the fabric of reality itself. In the distance, the Void Hunter fleet had begun their harvest convergence, their organic vessels pulsing with dark energy as they prepared to consume everything in the system. The two forces were on a collision course with physics itself, and the outcome would determine the fate of galactic civilization. The final battle was about to begin, and reality itself hung in the balance. The moment Admiral Chun gave the signal, reality began to scream. Commander Fel Kane watched from the evacuation transport as the Deathworlder Alliance fleet initiated their convergence disruption protocol. Space itself twisted into impossible geometries as the collective consciousness vessels generated gravitational anomalies that bent light around them like liquid. The Terran ships began firing weapons that seemed to tear holes in the fabric of existence, while streams of exotic matter poured from dimensional rifts that should not have been able to exist. The Void Hunter fleet responded to the Alliance attack with predatory fury. Their organic vessels pulsed with dark energy as they accelerated their harvest convergence, determined to complete their reality-consuming ritual before the Deathworlders could disrupt their carefully orchestrated formation. "By all the gods of the core worlds," Major Zorvok whispered, his four blue arms gripping the transport's emergency handholds as the ship bucked and rolled through waves of distorted space-time. "What have we unleashed?" The battle unfolding before them defied every law of physics in the Federation's scientific databases. Terran weapons created cascading failures in local space-time that spread from target to target like cosmic wildfire. Ursinoid plasma cannons fired streams of superheated matter that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Manted bioships released swarms of quantum-entangled organisms that began rewriting the fundamental constants of reality in localized areas. "The energy readings are off all known scales," Dr. Marin Lightwing reported from her portable scanner, her compound eyes tracking impossible measurements. "Commander, the power outputs we're observing should collapse the local stellar group into a black hole." Through the chaos of exotic weapons fire and reality distortions, the Void Hunter fleet pressed their attack. The massive World Eater vessels at the center of their formation began to pulse in perfect synchronization, their biomechanical forms channeling the consumed essence of countless civilizations into their harvest convergence. Admiral Chin's voice cut through the communication static, her words distorted by the dimensional interference surrounding the Terran flagship. "Alliance vessels. The Hunters are approaching convergence critical mass. Initiate reality anchor protocols now." The effect was immediate and terrifying. The collective consciousness ships suddenly became blazingly bright as they activated systems that literally pinned local space-time into rigid configurations. Reality crystallized around them, creating stable zones where physics worked according to normal laws, even as chaos raged in the surrounding space. Their anchoring reality itself, Lieutenant Vex observed with scientific fascination, her reptilian features reflecting the prismatic light from the crystal ships. The quantum signatures are stabilizing within the anchor zones. But the Void Hunters were adapting with frightening speed. The organic vessels began reconfiguring their formations, spreading out to avoid the reality anchors while maintaining their convergence ritual. Dark energy tendrils reached between their ships, creating a web of power that pulsed with malevolent intelligence. "Admiral Chun, they're redistributing the convergence matrix," Captain Santos reported from the destroyer Vengeful Spirit. "The ritual is becoming more resilient to disruption." Admiral Chin's response crackled with cold fury. "Then, we'll have to try something even more insane. All Terran vessels, prepare for Protocol Ragnarok." Commander Thelkane felt her primary heart skip a beat at the name. Any military protocol, named after the legendary end of the world, was unlikely to be subtle or safe. "What is Protocol Ragnarok?" she asked into her communication headset. Admiral Chin's laugh was sharp and humorless. "Commander, we're about to demonstrate why humans are considered the most dangerously insane species in the galaxy. We're going to ram our flagship directly into the center of the Hunter convergence and detonate our dimensional core at point-blank range. The implications hit the Federation crew like a physical blow. The Terran flagship was over 2 kilometers long and massed more than some asteroids. Its dimensional core contained enough exotic matter to power a small star. Detonating it inside the Hunter formation would create an explosion visible from neighboring star systems. "Admiral, that's suicide," Major Zorvok protested, his diplomatic training finally overcome by the sheer audacity of the plan. "Major, suicide implies we have other options," Admiral Chen replied calmly. "The convergence is reaching critical mass faster than anticipated. If we don't disrupt it in the next 4 minutes, they'll tear a permanent hole in reality that will eventually consume half the galaxy." Through the transport's viewports, they could see the massive Terran flagship beginning to accelerate directly toward the heart of the Void Hunter fleet. The Retribution's hull glowed with internal fires as its crew pushed every system past Redline, preparing for their final, desperate gambit. "All Alliance vessels, this is Admiral Chun. It's been an honor fighting alongside you. Continue the convergence disruption from safe distance. If this works, the energy release will be substantial." The other Deathworlder ships began pulling back to minimum safe distance, their weapons continuing to fire into the Hunter formations as they retreated. Only the Retribution continued its suicidal charge, driving straight into the heart of enemy formation like a spear thrown by an angry god. The Void Hunters tried desperately to stop the incoming flagship. Biomechanical tentacles lashed out from their World Eater vessels, wrapping around the Terran ship and trying to crush its hull. Dark energy weapons fired continuously, scarring the Retribution's armor and setting entire sections ablaze. But the flagship pressed on, its dimensional engines tearing holes in space-time as it forced its way through the Hunter defensive formations. The ship's weapons fired continuously, clearing a path through the organic vessels that tried to block its approach. 30 seconds to impact, Admiral Chen announced, her voice steady despite the chaos surrounding her ship. "All hands, prepare for dimensional core detonation." It's been a privilege serving with the finest crew in the Terran Alliance. The Federation representatives watched in stunned silence as the Retribution disappeared into the heart of the Hunter convergence, swallowed by a web of dark energy and organic matter that pulsed with malevolent power. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, the universe exploded. The dimensional core detonation created a sphere of pure annihilation that expanded outward at near light speed. Reality itself unraveled within the blast radius, reducing matter, energy, and even space-time to their most fundamental components before rebuilding them in new configurations. The Void Hunter convergence, which had been moments away from completion, collapsed in on itself as the delicate quantum entanglements that powered it were shattered by the dimensional explosion. The World Eater vessels at the center of the formation simply ceased to exist, their biomechanical forms unable to withstand the raw forces unleashed by the Terran sacrifice. But the explosion was far from over. The collapse of the Hunter convergence created a feedback wave that propagated through their entire fleet, causing cascading failures in their organic technology. Ships that had seemed invulnerable moments before began tearing themselves apart as their biomechanical systems failed catastrophically. "The convergence is collapsing," Dr. Lightwing reported with scientific amazement, her scanners barely able to process the readings they were detecting. "The quantum feedback is propagating through their entire fleet structure. They're losing coherence across all dimensional frequencies." The remaining Alliance vessels pressed their attack, pouring fire into the crippled Hunter formations. Without their convergence ritual to sustain them, the organic vessels proved surprisingly vulnerable to conventional weapons. Ursinoid plasma cannons punched through bioarmor that had previously been impenetrable, while mantid organisms devoured the failing Hunter ships from within. The collective consciousness ships began generating new gravitational anomalies that trapped the fleeing Hunter vessels in localized space-time distortions. Unable to escape and no longer able to adapt at their previous rate, The organic ships found themselves systematically destroyed by an alliance that had learned to fight with the fury of desperate predators. Commander Thelkane watched the systematic annihilation of the Hunter fleet with mixed emotions. The sacrifice of Admiral Chun and her crew had saved galactic civilization, but the cost had been enormous. The retribution and everyone aboard her had been completely consumed by the dimensional explosion. Commander, Communications Officer Lyra announced suddenly, her crystalline form brightening with excitement. I'm detecting a transmission from the blast zone. It's Admiral Chun. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing a scene that defied belief. Admiral Chun stood on what appeared to be the bridge of the Retribution, but the ship's hull was now composed of some kind of exotic matter that shifted between dimensions. The Admiral herself looked unchanged, except for her eyes, which now held depths that seemed to contain entire universes. This is Admiral Chun to all Alliance vessels. The Retribution has survived detonation by transitioning to a higher dimensional state. We're currently existing in approximately 7 dimensions simultaneously, which is giving us a rather unique perspective on local space-time. The bridge crew of the evacuation transport stared at the transmission in stunned amazement. The Admiral and her crew had not only survived their suicidal charge, but had somehow evolved beyond conventional three-dimensional existence. Admiral, this is Commander Thelkane. Are you and your crew still human? Admiral Chun smiled, and the expression contained layers of meaning that hurt to contemplate. Commander, we're more human than we've ever been. The dimensional transition has enhanced our capabilities rather than replacing them. We're still the same crew that answered your distress call. We just operate on a somewhat expanded scale now. The last of the Void Hunter vessels were being systematically destroyed by the Alliance fleet, their biomechanical forms unable to adapt to the reality-warping weapons being deployed against them. The threat that had consumed entire galactic arms was finally being contained and eliminated. Admiral, what happens now? Major Zorvok asked, his scientific mind struggling to process the implications of transdimensional human evolution. Now, Major, we hunt down every last Void Hunter in the galaxy and make sure they never threaten civilization again. The Terran Alliance has just evolved beyond conventional physical limitations, and we intend to use our new capabilities to protect the species that aren't quite ready to transcend dimensional barriers. Dr. Lightwing leaned forward with intense curiosity. Admiral, would it be possible to study the dimensional transition process? The scientific implications are staggering. Admiral Chin's laugh echoed across multiple dimensional frequencies simultaneously. Doctor, humans spent 300 years learning to fight the Void Hunters in conventional space-time. Now we have access to higher dimensions where the laws of physics work differently. We're going to need time to explore our new capabilities before we can safely share them with others. The battle was over. The Void Hunter fleet lay in ruins, their harvest convergence permanently disrupted, and their biomechanical technology reduced to inert organic matter drifting through space. The immediate threat to galactic civilization had been eliminated. But as Commander Thelkane watched the transdimensional Terran flagship phase in and out of normal space-time, she realized that the galaxy would never be the same. The Deathworlder Alliance had saved civilization by becoming something beyond conventional understanding. Commander, Admiral Chin's voice carried across the communication link with warm affection. Your distress call reached us at the perfect time. The Void Hunters have been growing bolder, preparing to assault the core worlds directly. By forcing them to commit their main fleet here, you've given us the opportunity to eliminate their primary threat permanently. Admiral, on behalf of the Federation, I cannot express our gratitude adequately. You've saved billions of lives. Commander, saving lives is what humans do best, even when it requires us to become something other than human to do it. The evacuation fleet began the long journey back toward Federation space, escorted by the remaining Alliance vessels. Behind them, the transdimensional Retribution continued its patrol of the battlefield, ensuring that no hunter vessels had survived the systematic destruction of their fleet. As they traveled through hyperspace toward the core worlds, Commander Thelkane reflected on the lessons learned during the battle. The Federation had discovered that survival sometimes required abandoning cherished principles in favor of brutal pragmatism. They had learned that the galaxy contained allies whose capabilities far exceeded anything in their databases. Most importantly, they had learned that when faced with extinction, even the most peaceful civilizations could find the strength to fight back with devastating effectiveness. The war against the Void Hunters was far from over, but for the first time in months, there was genuine hope for victory. 3 months after the Battle of Kepler, 442b, the Federation's Grand Assembly Hall buzzed with unprecedented activity. Representatives from over 200 species had gathered for what many considered the most important session in galactic history. The topic of discussion was not trade agreements or exploration protocols, but the fundamental reorganization of galactic civilization in response to the continuing Void Hunter threat. Commander Thelkane, recently promoted to Admiral following her exemplary defense of Station Kepler, 442b, stood at the primary podium addressing the assembled delegates. Her 6 eyes swept across the vast chamber, noting the presence of several new delegations, including representatives from the Deathworld Alliance whose intervention had saved the Federation from extinction. Honored delegates, Admiral Thelkane began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic enhancement systems. We gather today to address a reality that has fundamentally changed our understanding of galactic civilization. The Void Hunter threat is not contained to the rim sectors, nor is it a temporary crisis that will resolve through diplomatic means. Intelligence reports from our new allies indicate that the creatures we faced at Kepler were merely the vanguard of a much larger invasion force. Murmurs of concern rippled through the assembly as delegates consulted their data tablets and exchanged worried glances. The pristine chamber, with its crystalline architecture and peaceful ambient lighting, seemed almost absurdly civilized compared to the brutal realities being discussed. Admiral Granite Crusher of Enemies materialized on a secondary platform, his massive crystalline form refracting the chamber's lights into prismatic displays. When he spoke, his voice resonated through the stone foundations of the building itself. Federation representatives who seek understanding, the collective consciousness has monitored Void Hunter activities for 12,000 standard years. The fleet destroyed at Kepler, 442b, represented less than 3% of their total military capability. The assembly fell into stunned silence. Even after witnessing the devastating battle and the miraculous intervention by the Deathworld Alliance, most Federation citizens had assumed that the elimination of the Hunter fleet represented a decisive victory. Dr. Marin Lightwing, now serving as the Federation's chief xenobiologist and Deathworld liaison, activated a holographic display showing intelligence gathered from captured Hunter biotechnology. The data was disturbing in its implications. Our analysis of the destroyed Hunter vessels reveals biological adaptations spanning millions of years of evolution. These creatures have consumed entire galactic superclusters, incorporating the knowledge and capabilities of countless civilizations into their collective consciousness. They are not simply predators. They are the accumulated hunger of everything they have ever devoured. The Andromedan delegation leader, Chancellor Vorth Nexilian, rose from his position in the diplomatic gallery. His 4 arms gestured frantically as he addressed the assembly. Dr. Lightwing, are you suggesting that diplomacy with these creatures is impossible? Surely any intelligent species can be reasoned with, given sufficient understanding of their motivations. The response came not from Dr. Lightwing, but from a new voice that seemed to speak from multiple dimensions simultaneously. The transdimensional form of Admiral Sarah Chun materialized in the chamber's center, her enhanced state allowing her to exist partially in normal space-time while maintaining access to higher dimensional frequencies. Chancellor Nexilian, the Void Hunters have consumed over 40,000 sapient species across multiple galactic arms. We've recovered fragments of their communications from destroyed vessels. They don't see other life forms as potential allies or equals. They categorize everything as either food or obstacles to feeding. Admiral Chen's presence in the chamber was both comforting and unsettling. Her successful dimensional transition had made her and her crew incredibly powerful allies, but it also served as a reminder of the extreme measures that survival might require. The human delegation proposes the establishment of a galactic defense coalition with full authority to implement whatever measures are necessary to protect civilized space. This includes the authorization of weapons and tactics that the Federation has traditionally considered too dangerous for deployment. The proposal sparked immediate debate throughout the Assembly. The peaceful species that formed the Federation's core membership had built their civilization on principles of minimal violence and diplomatic resolution. The idea of authorizing superweapons and reality-warping technology challenged everything they believed in. Representative Silthana of the Verdanian Collective raised her concerns from the botanical delegation area. Admiral Chun, while we understand the necessity of defensive measures, authorizing unlimited weapons development could lead to our own civilization becoming as destructive as the forces we oppose. Chief Engineer Boric Ironhold, now serving as military liaison for the Ursinoid battle clans, growled his disagreement. The massive bear-like being's scarred features reflected years of combat against threats that had taught his people the value of overwhelming force. Representative Silthana, my people learned long ago that survival requires the willingness to become temporarily uncivilized in order to preserve civilization permanently. The Void Hunters respond only to extinction-level force. Half measures will only delay our eventual consumption. Major Zorvok, recently appointed as the Federation's Director of Xenomilitary Affairs, activated tactical displays showing the current strategic situation. The holographic maps revealed a sobering truth. Hunter forces were advancing along multiple fronts, consuming star systems at an accelerating pace. The Deathworld Alliance has agreed to share their weapons technology and tactical knowledge, but implementation will require fundamental changes to our military doctrine. We're not just talking about new ships and weapons, we're talking about completely reconceptualizing how we think about warfare itself. The Mantid delegation Hivemind spoke through their primary representative, Queen Voice, clicking death songs. The insectoid being's compound eyes reflected tactical calculations running across dozens of parallel thought processes. Federation speakers of many voices, the Hivemind has calculated probability matrices for various defensive strategies. Traditional Federation military doctrine results in 97% probability of total extinction within 18 standard months. Deathworld Alliance protocols increase survival probability to 63%, with acceptable casualties limited to Outer Rim territories. The stark mathematical analysis cut through the philosophical debates that have been dominating the discussion. Numbers didn't lie, and the numbers painted a grim picture of their options. Lieutenant Vex, now promoted to captain and serving as Admiral Thelkane's chief intelligence officer, presented the latest reconnaissance data from Hunter-occupied territories. The images were horrifying. Entire star systems drained of energy, planets reduced to hollow shells, and the twisted remains of Hunter or bioships growing like cancer throughout previously inhabited space. Our long-range probes have confirmed that Hunter forces are consolidating in the former Epsilon sector. Intelligence suggests they're constructing something massive, possibly a dimensional gateway that would allow them to bring in reinforcements from other galactic arms. Admiral Thelkane studied the data with growing alarm. The Federation's survival had come to depend on allies whose capabilities far exceeded their own, and whose methods challenged every principle they held sacred. The question before this assembly, she announced, is whether we're willing to authorize the formation of a coalition government with the Deathworld Alliance, including the deployment of weapons technology that our ancestors would have considered abhorrent. The debate that followed was unprecedented in Federation history. Species that had coexisted peacefully for centuries found themselves arguing over the morality of preemptive strikes, the ethics of reality-warping weapons, and the acceptable cost of survival. The crystalline delegate from the Silicon Communes raised concerns about environmental impact. The weapons being proposed could destabilize entire star systems. How do we balance immediate survival against long-term galactic ecology? Captain Santos, now commanding the Terran Alliance's expanded expeditionary force, addressed the concern with characteristic human pragmatism. Delegate Prism of Reflected Thought, dead ecosystems don't evolve. Consumed civilizations don't get second chances. We can worry about environmental restoration after we've ensured there's still an environment to restore. Dr. Lightwing presented her final analysis of the Hunter biotechnology, including discoveries that had emerged from studying the remains of their dimensional convergence ritual. The implications were staggering. The Void Hunters aren't just consuming matter and energy, they're harvesting the quantum information that defines local reality. Each system they consume makes them better at consuming additional systems. They're becoming more efficient predators with every victory. The revelation shifted the entire dynamic of the debate. If the Hunters were adapting and improving with each conquest, then any delay in implementing effective countermeasures would only make eventual victory more difficult. Admiral Chen's transdimensional form shifted through several phases of existence as she addressed the Assembly's concerns. Delegates, humans understand the reluctance to abandon peaceful principles. Our own species spent centuries trying to solve conflicts through diplomacy and mutual understanding. But some enemies cannot be reasoned with, they can only be defeated. The vote, when it finally came, was closer than many had expected. The formation of the Galactic Defense Coalition passed by a narrow margin, with several traditional Federation worlds abstaining rather than explicitly endorsing the new military doctrine. The motion carries, Admiral Thelkane announced formally. The Galactic Defense Coalition is hereby established with full authority to implement defensive measures deemed necessary for the survival of galactic civilization. The ceremony that followed was unlike anything in Federation history. Representatives from species that measured their existence in geological timescales stood alongside beings who had evolved on worlds where death lurked behind every shadow. The alliance was unprecedented in its scope and absolutely necessary for survival. Admiral Chen's crew, still adapting to their transdimensional existence, demonstrated capabilities that redefine the possible. They could be in multiple locations simultaneously, process information at rates that challenged conventional understanding, and manipulate matter and energy in ways that seemed like magic to three-dimensional observers. The first priority of the coalition will be the construction of a defensive perimeter around the core worlds, Admiral Chun announced. We'll establish reality anchor stations that will prevent the Hunters from using dimensional gateways to bypass our defenses. Chief Engineer Ironhold outlined the massive construction projects that would be required. We're talking about engineering projects on a stellar scale. Artificial planets designed solely for weapons production, orbital shipyards that can construct battle fleets measured in the thousands, and defensive installations that can channel the output of entire stars. The scope of the undertaking was staggering, but so was the alternative. The Federation had learned that survival required not just the willingness to fight, but the capability to fight more effectively than enemies who had consumed countless other civilizations. There's one more thing, Admiral Chun announced as the Assembly prepared to conclude. The Terran Alliance has been in contact with other transdimensional entities, beings who have successfully defended against Hunter incursions in parallel realities. We're not alone in this fight, and we're not the first civilization to face this particular form of extinction. The implications of multidimensional warfare and parallel reality cooperation opened entirely new possibilities for both survival and victory. The Federation had entered a new age where the boundaries between science and what their ancestors would have called magic were becoming increasingly blurred. As the Assembly dispersed, The various delegates began the process of preparing their homeworlds for total war against an enemy that threatened the very concept of existence. The peaceful exploration and diplomatic cooperation that had defined the Federation for centuries would continue, but now would be protected by weapons and allies that could rewrite the laws of physics when necessary. Admiral Felkane stood alone in the empty assembly hall, reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this point. A simple distress call from a besieged research station had led to first contact with beings who would fundamentally change the nature of galactic civilization. "Commander," Admiral Chen's voice reached her through dimensional frequencies that allowed communication across impossible distances. "The real war is just beginning. The hunters we faced at Kepler were scouts. Their main forces are still mobilizing in the dark regions beyond the galactic rim. How long do we have to prepare?" Admiral Felkane asked, looking up at the star-filled dome of the assembly hall. "Based on our current intelligence, approximately 2 years before they begin their primary offensive. 2 years to transform the Federation from a peaceful exploration alliance into a military coalition capable of fighting enemies that have consumed entire galaxies." The challenge was unprecedented, but so were their allies. The Deathworld Alliance had shown that survival was possible, even against seemingly insurmountable odds. The key was the willingness to evolve, adapt, and become whatever was necessary to protect the things that mattered most. As Admiral Felkane walked through the corridors of the Federation capital, she could see the changes already beginning. Construction crews were installing reality anchor generators. Weapons research facilities were being established in previously peaceful systems, and recruitment centers for the new coalition military were opening on worlds that had never known war. The Federation was transforming itself into something its founders might not have recognized, but it was doing so in service of the principles they had cherished: the protection of life, the advancement of knowledge, and the hope that civilized beings could coexist peacefully throughout the galaxy. The distress call that had brought the Deathworld Alliance to Kepler 442b had saved more than a single research station. It had forged alliances that would reshape the galaxy and provide hope for victory against forces that had previously seemed unstoppable. The real test would come when the Hunter main fleet finally arrived, bringing with it the accumulated might of countless consumed civilizations. But for the first time since the crisis began, galactic civilization had reason to believe that survival was not just possible, but inevitable. The age of peaceful exploration was ending, but the age of triumphant survival had begun. And in the vast darkness between the stars, other civilizations received the Coalition's own message, a call not for help, but for alliance against the darkness that threatened to consume everything in its path. The galaxy,